The Benton family had arrived at Westfield Plaza on a crisp Saturday morning, the mall already bustling with shoppers navigating escalators, kiosks, and the occasional blaring announcement over the PA system. 8-year-old Lucas Benton, small for his age but quick with a grin that could light up a room, held his mother's hand tightly as they walked toward the central elevator bank. His mother, Sarah Benton, had promised him a trip to the arcade, a rare weekend treat meant to distract him from the long week at school. The mall, in all its bright fluorescent chaos, felt ordinary, nothing out of place, nothing that hinted at the terror to come. Yet, as Lucas skipped slightly ahead, eager to press the elevator button, there was a flicker in the air, an almost imperceptible pause in the hum of the environment. The elevator doors slid open, and they stepped inside with a crowd of shoppers waiting behind them. Security cameras overhead captured the usual footage. Shoppers checking phones, a man in a red jacket shifting nervously, a janitor pushing a mop across the polished tiles. Lucas bounced on the balls of his feet, pressing the button for the food court above. His mother's eyes followed him, scanning the other passengers with mild curiosity, noting the brief smiles exchanged with strangers and the dull clatter of heels on tile. Then, as the elevator began its ascent, witnesses later recalled something unusual. The doors, at some point between the first and second floors, had opened briefly. Some said they glimpsed a floor that was not on any directory, a place that seemed to shimmer at the edges, lit in a way that was not consistent with the rest of the mall. Others, less sure, dismissed it as a trick of the light or a momentary hallucination born of distraction. But in that fraction of a second, Lucas Benton was gone. Panic set in immediately. Sarah reached for him and found only empty space where he had been standing. The elevator shuttered and closed, continuing its mechanical journey as if nothing had happened. Shoppers called out, their voices overlapping in chaos, but no one could explain what they had just seen. Security was summoned within moments, and the elevator's interior was checked thoroughly, every corner examined. Nothing. No child, no sign of struggle, no hint of where Lucas could have gone. The footage from the elevator cameras was later reviewed, but it offered little clarity. For a single frame, there was a flicker, static rippling across the screen, distorting the image just as the elevator doors appeared to open on that mysterious floor. Security technicians replayed the tape repeatedly, slowed it down, enhanced it, but every attempt yielded the same frustratingly vague result, a shimmer of interference, and Lucas was gone. Mall authorities immediately initiated a lockdown of the building. Shoppers were escorted out, stores were checked, janitorial closets inspected, storage areas examined. Officers scoured stairwells, utility rooms, and maintenance corridors, questioning employees who could provide any insight. Witnesses were lined up in the security office, describing the moments before the disappearance. Each account was slightly different, as memory often is in moments of panic. Some remembered hearing a small gasp. Others described the doors opening onto a floor bathed in unnatural light. No one could account for how Lucas had disappeared in what should have been a simple, mundane ride between levels. The Benton family was thrust into shock. Sarah Benton, gripping the security railing for support, could barely comprehend the absence of her son. Her husband, David Benton, who had arrived moments later after being called by frantic security staff, stood frozen in disbelief. Their youngest child, Max, too young to understand the full gravity of the situation, clung to his mother's leg, tears streaking his face. Police officers tried to calm the family, assuring them that search teams would comb the entire building, that alerts were being sent to surrounding precincts, that every available resource would be deployed. Yet in the hollow of that elevator shaft, in the echo of the doors sliding shut, there was only fear and uncertainty. Outside, the media quickly arrived. Drawn to the story of a missing child in a major urban center, cameras captured the Bentons' grief, interviews with eyewitnesses, and the flurry of law enforcement activity. Social media began to churn with speculation, some sympathetic, some accusatory, and some wildly conspiratorial. In the midst of the chaos, the mall was closed for hours, then partially reopened, but the space felt haunted. A public area shadowed by the inexplicable event that had just unfolded. Investigators cataloged every detail, timestamps, elevator logs, security footage, and witness statements. Each piece of evidence, however, only deepened the mystery. The elevator's mechanical records indicated no stops at unlisted floors, and technicians confirmed that the system functioned normally before and after the incident. Yet the memory lingered. Every officer, security guard, and shopper involved reported the same unease, a sense that something had occurred that could not be explained by ordinary means. For the Benton family, the world had shifted in an instant, a single ride in an elevator becoming the beginning of a nightmare that would stretch for years. They would spend the following days in a haze of grief, meeting with detectives, answering calls from well-meaning strangers, and facing the harrowing task of explaining to Max that his brother had disappeared without warning. The mall, once a place of ordinary commerce and casual joy, became a symbol of a mystery that defied reason, a puzzle that would haunt everyone who had been present on that day. Even as the police began their methodical investigation, scouring records and interviewing every potential witness, the thought remained in the back of everyone's minds. How could a child vanish in a space that should have been secure and monitored? And if the elevator had somehow opened onto a floor that did not exist, where had Lucas Benton gone, and what waited there? That question, unanswerable and terrifying, would become the first thread in a long, dark story that refused to let go. Detectives arrived at Westfield Plaza within minutes of the Benton family's frantic calls, their uniforms crisp and radios crackling with updates. They began by canvassing the immediate area, starting with the elevator where Lucas had vanished. Officers moved systematically, questioning every employee, from the janitor who had been mopping nearby to the security guards stationed at various entrances. Shoppers were interviewed on the spot, their statements recorded in meticulous detail. Most could only recount fragments, a flicker in the elevator doors, a brief shimmer of light on an unlisted floor, or the sound of a child's laughter abruptly cut off. Each report was slightly different, as human memory often is when confronted with sudden trauma, and detectives noted the inconsistencies, unsure whether they were clues or the result of panic and confusion. Forensic teams began their work, focusing first on the elevator itself. Technicians downloaded what remained of the machine's logs, only to find that the records around the time of Lucas's disappearance were corrupted, interrupted by an unexplained glitch that no software engineer could immediately account for. Maintenance records, when reviewed, showed no prior anomalies or mechanical failures in the system's recent history. The elevator had passed all safety inspections, and yet it now seemed central to the disappearance. Engineers tested the cabin's doors, sensors, and motors, each device functioning within normal parameters. Yet the flicker of static in the security footage remained, a single frame where Lucas should have been visible, but was not. Specialists replayed the footage repeatedly, analyzing every pixel, but the anomaly persisted, brief, inexplicable, and deeply unsettling. Detectives expanded their search beyond the elevator. They reviewed mall blueprints, stairwells, storage areas, and service corridors, checking for any possible hiding place or overlooked access point. Nothing matched the descriptions given by witnesses, and every area that could have concealed a child was accounted for. Officers interviewed maintenance staff, contractors, and even delivery personnel, anyone with routine access to the mall's inner workings. Each inquiry ended with frustration. No one had seen anything unusual, no one had noticed an unaccounted presence, and the trail of Lucas Benton seemed to vanish as completely as he had. Meanwhile, Sarah Benton refused to remain passive. While detectives conducted their methodical investigation, she launched a personal campaign to find her son. Flyers were printed with his photograph, a bright-eyed image meant to capture attention, and distributed throughout the city. Posters appeared in storefronts, on utility poles, and in community centers, all carrying the urgent plea for information. Sarah spoke to local media outlets, her voice steady despite the grief that threatened to overwhelm her. She offered a reward for any information leading to Lucas's safe return, contacted neighborhood watch groups, and spent hours posting online in forums dedicated to missing children. Her days blurred into nights, driven by the unshakable belief that someone, somewhere, had seen her son and could help bring him home. Detectives noted her efforts, both admiring and concerned, as the line between hope and obsession grew thinner with each passing hour. Officers continued their methodical canvassing, retracing the Benton family's steps from the parking lot to the food court, checking all points of potential contact. Witnesses who initially appeared indifferent were called back for follow-up interviews, but again, nothing concrete emerged. Security teams combed through video feeds from surrounding businesses and traffic cameras, attempting to trace any movement outside the mall. Forensic analysts enhanced every frame, searching for the faintest shadow or reflection that could indicate Lucas's presence, but every lead evaporated under scrutiny. Even as the investigation proceeded, questions mounted. How could a child vanish in a space monitored so closely, with no one else noticing anything out of the ordinary? Was it a mechanical failure, a human intervention, or something else entirely? Officers considered every possibility, documenting theories, compiling reports, and coordinating with state-level missing persons units. Each line of inquiry led to further questions rather than answers. Maintenance logs, once thought reliable, offered no clues. The elevator functioned perfectly in tests, yet it remained central to the disappearance. Neighbors, mall employees, and even strangers began to offer theories. Some suggested Lucas might have wandered into an unmonitored stairwell and been abducted. Others whispered about hidden floors or forgotten service passages that no one had considered. The investigators remained professional, methodical, insisting on evidence, yet the faint hum of speculation filled the spaces around the case. Social media chatter amplified every suggestion, true or false, adding pressure to an already tense and emotionally charged situation. Days turned into weeks, and the Benton family lived in a constant state of limbo. Sarah's obsession with distributing flyers and speaking to the public contrasted with David Benton's quieter, more pragmatic approach, a tension that reflected the broader strain the disappearance placed on them both. Investigators continued to scour leads, every potential angle, every possible explanation, yet the case began to solidify as a cold trail. Still, the belief that Lucas might be out there, somewhere unseen, somewhere waiting, remained unshaken, a fragile thread of hope holding the family together. By the end of the initial investigation, the mall had been combed multiple times, the elevator analyzed by the best engineers, and the Benton family had made their plea to the public. Yet the answers remained elusive. In the silence of that unanswered question of a child vanished without trace, the story was only beginning. The mystery of Lucas Benton's disappearance lingered in the minds of investigators, the public, and most of all, his mother, who would not rest until she understood what had happened within those ordinary, yet inexplicably impossible, elevator doors. The days following Lucas Benton's disappearance settled into a tense, hollow rhythm within the Benton household. Sarah and David attempted to maintain normalcy for Max, their younger son, but the absence of his older brother hung over them like an unspoken weight. Max began to withdraw, retreating into the corners of his room for hours, his small hands clenching at toys he no longer played with, eyes darting at the slightest sound. He would ask questions in whispers, sometimes about Lucas, sometimes about the elevator itself, as if he feared that speaking too loudly might summon answers or reveal something he wasn't ready to face. Every unanswered question chipped away at his sense of safety, leaving a quiet, pervasive fear in its place. Sarah, meanwhile, immersed herself completely in the circumstances of the elevator. Every detail, every flicker of static in the CCTV footage replayed in her mind endlessly. She scoured online forums about missing children, reading stories of unexplained disappearances and technological anomalies, searching for anything that could make sense of what had happened. Occasionally, she spoke aloud to the empty living room, articulating theories she could barely convince herself were rational. Friends and relatives began to notice subtle shifts in her demeanor, long hours poring over elevator schematics, obsessive inquiries into mall maintenance logs, and a persistent insistence that the disappearance was not random, that something deliberate had occurred. David, though equally devastated, tried to anchor the household with pragmatism. He sought out support groups, attempted to maintain Max's daily routine, and advised Sarah to seek professional counseling. Police detectives recommended grief counseling for both children, emphasizing that trauma could manifest in unpredictable ways, especially for a child who had witnessed a sibling vanish in an utterly bewildering manner. They cautioned against speculation and warned that obsessing over extraordinary explanations could hinder the healing process. The Benton family listened, nodded, but the underlying fear and suspicion refused to dissipate. For them, the normal channels of support could not fill the void left by Lucas's sudden disappearance. Max's behavioral changes grew more pronounced over the following weeks. Night terrors became frequent, leaving him drenched in sweat and inconsolable. He would speak in fragmented sentences about the other floor and the doors that swallowed Lucas, language that reflected both the lingering trauma and a child's literal interpretation of events he could not fully understand. David tried to comfort him, yet the emotional distance between them widened as the mystery of Lucas's disappearance cast a shadow over every interaction. Sarah, driven by a mixture of fear and hope, found herself identifying with Max's perception, reinforcing her conviction that the elevator held secrets beyond ordinary comprehension. Unable to rely solely on police efforts, the Bentons hired a private investigator. The investigator, a seasoned former detective familiar with missing children cases, approached the task with methodical precision. He reviewed the mall's blueprints, scrutinized the elevator's mechanical records, and re-interviewed witnesses who had initially spoken to the police. Each lead, each statement, each fragment of CCTV footage was dissected for inconsistencies or overlooked details. The investigator's presence brought a fragile sense of control to the household, a reassurance that someone outside the police force was dedicated solely to uncovering what had happened. Yet, even with his expertise, the case resisted clarity. Every avenue seemed to circle back to the same questions: how a child could vanish in a monitored public space, and what, if anything, the elevator itself had to do with it. As weeks turned into months, tension within the family increased. Sarah's obsession deepened. She spent hours tracing the elevator's circuitry on large sheets of paper, cross-referencing maintenance logs and annotating security footage frame by frame. David found himself in repeated conflicts with her over the necessity of letting Max return to some semblance of normal life. Arguments erupted over the smallest details, whether to answer Max's fearful questions about the hidden floor, whether to continue allowing the investigator access to every corner of the home, even whether to entertain any media attention. The stress of grief and uncertainty fractured their unity, leaving raw edges that cut at the very foundation of the family. The private investigator uncovered several anomalies in witness statements. One security guard had claimed the elevator doors had paused briefly on a floor that did not exist in any official blueprint, an observation that had not been highlighted in the initial police reports. Another employee recalled a strange humming sound, barely audible, coinciding with the exact moment Lucas vanished. These inconsistencies offered tantalizing possibilities, but no concrete answers, deepening the sense of dread that something extraordinary and possibly sinister was at play. Sarah clung to these findings, interpreting them as evidence that the official investigation had overlooked crucial details, that the elevator itself might hold a hidden truth. David and Sarah, once united in grief, now navigated a landscape of fear, suspicion, and obsession. Max's nightly terrors and daytime withdrawal amplified the emotional strain, leaving each parent vulnerable to doubt and guilt. Yet, despite the fractures, the family remained committed to one shared goal: finding Lucas. Their unity, fragile as it was, rested on the hope that understanding the elevator's mysterious behavior would eventually lead them back to him. In the silence of their fractured home, the question remained, heavier than ever. What had truly happened in that elevator? And could they ever reclaim the life that vanished along with their son? The time 6 months had passed since Lucas Benton disappeared. The Benton household had become a tension-filled orbit of fear, obsession, and fractured hope. Yet outside their home, the mall itself seemed to carry the residue of that inexplicable moment, as if the building remembered what the authorities could not explain. Reports began to emerge from the technicians responsible for the elevators, systems registering activity on floors that officially did not exist, buttons lighting for no reason, and doors pausing as if awaiting a passenger that would never arrive. Each anomaly was dismissed by management as a minor malfunction, a quirk of aging equipment. But to Sarah Benton, these incidents were evidence that something beyond ordinary comprehension had taken her son. The private investigator, who had been working closely with the family, began keeping a detailed log of these events. He collected testimonies from elevator technicians who had worked on the Benton Mall over the years. One technician recalled the doors sliding open on a floor labeled 13A, which did not appear on any floor directory or schematics. Another spoke of a faint scratching sound within the elevator shaft, synchronized with the flickering of the indicator lights. For the investigators, these reports presented a difficult challenge. While no official record corroborated such events, the technicians' accounts were precise, detailed, and troublingly consistent. The elevator, a machine designed for safety and predictability, seemed to behave as though it possessed its own agenda, independent of the laws governing ordinary buildings. Security footage was subjected to repeated analysis, frame by frame, by both the mall's internal team and the private investigator. The results were unsettling. At intervals, the recordings would dissolve into static, as if the cameras themselves were being interrupted. Within those brief moments, indistinct shadows appeared, sometimes shifting across the frame in ways that defied normal movement. In some cases, what looked like symbols, scratched or drawn in condensation, manifested on the elevator walls. The marks were fleeting, appearing only in certain camera angles or lighting conditions, but they suggested intentionality, a sign of communication or warning that could not be easily dismissed. Each discovery intensified Sarah Benton's obsession. She began keeping a log of every shadow, scratch, and static flicker, convinced that patterns existed, patterns that, if deciphered, could explain where Lucas had gone. While the Benton family struggled to navigate grief and obsession, the private investigator began researching past missing children cases across the city. He noticed a chilling trend. Over the past decade, several children had disappeared under circumstances that were initially treated as unrelated incidents. In most cases, the last confirmed sighting involved an elevator or stairwell, with security cameras malfunctioning or producing corrupted footage at critical moments. Officially, the cases were closed or unresolved, but a thread connected them. The children vanished in public, monitored spaces where no ordinary abduction should have been possible. The realization unsettled the investigator deeply. Patterns that were invisible to the police, buried in decades of fragmented reports, suggested a systematic anomaly, one that was easily overlooked because it defied standard investigative assumptions. Sarah listened to these revelations with a mixture of horror and reluctant hope. Each account from other families mirrored her own trauma, reinforcing the possibility that Lucas's disappearance was not an isolated tragedy, but part of something far larger, something the city authorities had failed or been unable to understand. The investigator compiled a chart, mapping locations, times, and methods, seeking to identify links that might point to a common mechanism or influence. He noted that the elevators in all cases shared a similar design: centralized control systems, irregular maintenance logs, and histories of unexplained technical glitches. Even without definitive proof, the pattern itself seemed too precise to be coincidental. As the Benton household absorbed these findings, strange occurrences began manifesting within their own home. Max, Lucas' younger brother, reported hearing the soft hum of elevator doors in the middle of the night, despite the house having no elevator. Sarah heard scratching at the walls that mirrored the symbols seen in the mall footage. Objects would shift position, sometimes appearing in places Max swore he had not touched. The investigator remained cautious, warning the family against assuming supernatural causation. He emphasized that environmental or mechanical explanations could exist. Yet, he admitted privately that these events did not fit standard reasoning. For Sarah, rationality mattered less than the desperate hope that these signals were in some way linked to Lucas, proof that he had not been lost entirely but had entered a space that others could not see. The pattern across the city, combined with the mall's own anomalies, began to attract attention from fringe researchers, conspiracy theorists, and urban mystery forums. While official channels largely dismissed these connections as coincidental, the stories gained traction among those who had studied unsolved disappearances. Sarah became more entrenched in these discussions, seeking others who might offer insight into the hidden floors, the irregular elevator behavior, or the faint traces of symbols. Each online post or forum comment became a tentative breadcrumb in her obsessive search. The more she learned, the more convinced she became that Lucas's disappearance had left detectable marks, clues hidden in plain sight, ignored by those unwilling or unable to see them. Yet the deeper the family and the investigator delved, the more elusive the truth became. Each confirmed anomaly raised new questions. Why only children? Why only certain elevators or stairwells? Why were patterns consistent yet unrecognized by law enforcement? Every observation hinted at design, intent, or mechanism, but the ultimate explanation remained out of reach. The mystery had grown beyond a single mall, a single elevator, or a single child. It was as if a shadow had settled across the city, one that could be glimpsed only in brief, fleeting moments, static in the cameras, unregistered floors, cryptic scratches, before vanishing again, leaving only questions, fear, and the relentless drive to understand. By the time Lucas Benton's disappearance had reached the 6-month mark, the story had begun to bleed beyond local concern. A regional news outlet picked up the case, initially reporting the facts. An 8-year-old boy vanished in a mall elevator, surveillance footage inconclusive, police baffled. But as reporters dug into the anomalies, the elevator stopping on non-existent floors, corrupted CCTV, and the untraceable symbols found on walls, the narrative began to shift. Viewers were drawn not only to the tragedy of a missing child, but to the mystery of the unexplained phenomena surrounding his disappearance. Social media accounts began amplifying the story, posting grainy images of elevator panels, screenshots of distorted footage, and urban legends about hidden or interdimensional floors. Soon, hashtags bearing Lucas's name trended, drawing attention from across the country, and amateur investigators and conspiracy enthusiasts flooded online forums, dissecting every detail. The Benton family, already exhausted by months of uncertainty, found themselves thrust into the unrelenting glare of public scrutiny. Support poured in, messages of sympathy, donations for search efforts, and shared stories from parents who had experienced similar disappearances. Yet the attention came with a darker side. Criticism, conspiracy theorists claiming the family was exaggerating or seeking attention, and trolls questioning the legitimacy of Lucas's disappearance created an environment of heightened tension and stress. Sarah Benton, once focused solely on private investigation and direct searches, now navigated public interviews, press conferences, and online debates, each interaction leaving her drained and increasingly desperate for control over the narrative. Authorities reacted with caution, publicly dismissing any suggestions of supernatural interference. Police statements emphasized traditional investigative approaches, technical malfunctions, abduction theories, or the possibility of Lucas wandering off and encountering foul play unrelated to the elevator anomalies. Investigators cautioned against allowing speculation to impede their work, reiterating that no evidence supported claims of hidden dimensions or interdimensional activity. Nevertheless, the public hunger for extraordinary explanations grew. Online forums were filled with comparisons to other unsolved urban disappearances, speculative timelines, and amateur reconstructions of the Benton Mall elevators. Every glitch in footage, every unrecorded maintenance entry, every whispered account of strange shadows was scrutinized, debated, and amplified, often detached from the factual investigative progress. The media frenzy complicated the efforts of law enforcement and the private investigator. Witnesses began to overstate what they had seen, influenced by reports and images circulated online. Conflicting testimonies emerged, creating dead ends that investigators struggled to parse from legitimate leads. Security teams at the mall reported interference from journalists and curious onlookers, further complicating the search for tangible evidence. Yet amidst the noise, there were moments of potential progress. A shopper came forward claiming to have glimpsed an elevator open briefly on a floor that did not exist, though details were inconsistent and unverifiable. The private investigator logged these accounts meticulously, aware that even flawed testimony could contain fragments of truth. The Benton family's emotional toll intensified under the weight of public attention. Sarah, already driven by grief and obsession, found herself alternating between hope and despair, caught between the possibility of recognition from sympathetic strangers and the exhaustion of facing scrutiny. Max, the younger brother, began exhibiting increased anxiety when cameras or reporters were present, his trauma amplified by constant questions and the relentless focus on Lucas's case. Family interactions were marked by tension, arguments, and brief episodes of fragile normalcy, all underscored by the shared fear that public attention might either help locate Lucas or distort the reality of what had occurred. As the story spread nationwide, urban legends began to intertwine with the facts. Social media users speculated about the existence of hidden floors, invisible to ordinary perception, or portals to alternate spaces accessible only to certain children. Amateur investigators suggested correlations with other missing child cases in the city, drawing lines between elevators, stairwells, and security malfunctions. While authorities dismissed these claims as unscientific, their repetition fueled public imagination and fear. The mall, once a routine location for shopping and leisure, became a symbol of uncertainty and dread, a place where ordinary safety was questioned and childhood vulnerability was starkly exposed. Television programs and online documentaries began to cover the Benton case, focusing on the strangeness of the elevator and the lack of definitive leads. Interviews with parents, private investigators, and select police officials highlighted the frustration inherent in unsolved disappearances, but they also emphasized the emotional consequences for families caught in prolonged uncertainty. Viewers were invited to speculate, to weigh in on forums and social channels, and to imagine connections between unrelated incidents. Each story thread, while potentially unrelated, was tied to the central mystery of Lucas's disappearance, amplifying the perception that something larger, something beyond conventional explanation, was at play. Despite the chaos, certain threads of evidence were documented and retained. Technical reports from elevator engineers, logs of prior incidents in other buildings, and the private investigators' pattern mapping were stored, creating a record that would serve as a reference for both the family and law enforcement in months to come. While public hysteria swelled and stories circulated, the factual investigative work proceeded in parallel, slower but methodical, highlighting the tension between sensationalized speculation and grounded inquiry. By the end of the frenzy's first wave, the Benton family faced a difficult reality. While nationwide attention ensured that Lucas's disappearance would not be forgotten, it also intensified emotional pressure and raised impossible questions about truth, perception, and the limits of public engagement. The family's fight for answers was no longer private. It was played out across news feeds, discussion boards, and television segments, a simultaneous source of support and strain. Yet amidst the confusion and contradiction, Sarah Benton remained resolute, convinced that somewhere in the growing tangle of stories, sightings, and anomalies lay a clue that could finally lead her to Lucas, a single thread capable of resolving the mystery that had swallowed her son. As the investigation entered its 9th month, the Benton case had evolved from a local tragedy into a complex puzzle that seemed to defy explanation. Authorities brought in government engineers and specialized elevator technicians to conduct exhaustive diagnostics of the mall's systems. Each component, from the control software to mechanical gears and emergency brakes, was scrutinized under meticulous protocols designed to reveal the smallest anomaly. Specialists ran repeated tests, simulating elevator trips across all floors, monitoring electrical currents, and tracking weight sensors. Every calculation, every observation returned the same conclusion. The elevators functioned within normal parameters. No error, no glitch. No misalignment could account for the elevator stopping on a floor that did not exist, or for the brief static recorded on the security feeds. Forensic analysts turned their attention to the mall itself. The blueprints of the building were examined down to the last detail. Floor plans were compared with maintenance schematics, wiring diagrams, and security system layouts. Investigators noticed what they described as unexplained gaps. Certain sections of the original designs were missing, replaced with later revisions that did not align with eyewitness accounts or security footage. Some security cameras had inexplicably blanked out at precise moments, their recordings corrupted or overwritten, leaving fragments that could neither confirm nor contradict witness statements. Analysts struggled to reconstruct timelines from incomplete footage, and even digital recovery tools could retrieve only partial frames, grainy images that hinted at movement but offered no definitive clues. The private investigator hired by the Benton family coordinated closely with the technical teams, providing witness accounts and incident logs, hoping to identify patterns that might reveal a mechanical or procedural explanation. Yet each lead dissolved under scrutiny. Elevator sensors that could have detected an obstruction showed no irregularities. Maintenance logs indicated routine inspections, with no prior incidents of doors opening between floors or unexplained floor requests. Every report and test added a layer of certainty that something beyond the ordinary, or beyond the measurable, was occurring. For detectives, the dead ends were frustrating. Officers accustomed to tangible evidence, fingerprints, surveillance footage, witness testimony, found themselves confronting phenomena that could not be easily quantified. Each null result from engineers and forensic teams deepened their uncertainty. Some questioned whether critical errors in reporting had occurred, while others feared that the missing pieces in the mall's schematics could suggest tampering, deliberate or otherwise. Yet no physical trace, no documented intrusion had been identified to suggest human interference. The mystery persisted, increasingly resistant to conventional investigative methods. Amid this technical labyrinth, the Benton family struggled to maintain clarity between hope and delusion. Sarah Benton meticulously reviewed every report, attending meetings with engineers and analysts, asking pointed questions and demanding explanations for every anomaly. She printed diagrams, marked discrepancies in red, and compared them with eyewitness testimony and historical records. Yet the more she learned, the more she felt the walls closing in. Each dead end amplified her obsession with the elevator, transforming it from a routine structure into a symbol of unseen forces and unresolved questions. Max, Lucas's younger brother, absorbed his mother's anxiety, sometimes lashing out, sometimes withdrawing, as the family's home became a secondary site of investigation. Charts and notes spread across tables, walls, and notebooks. Conspiracy theories, already fueled by social media and media coverage, found fertile ground in the absence of clear forensic answers. Online commentators speculated that the mall itself was a nexus for unexplained phenomena, a building with invisible access points or hidden dimensions. Others suggested clandestine government experiments, intentionally erased evidence, or advanced technology beyond public knowledge. Though authorities consistently dismissed these claims, pointing to the rigor of engineering and forensic analysis, the lack of tangible explanations allowed the theories to circulate unchecked. Each failure to identify a mechanical or software anomaly strengthened public fascination and amplified the emotional strain on the Benton family. As weeks turned into months, investigators organized their findings into detailed case files. Patterns, however incomplete, were logged and cross-referenced with other disappearances across the city. Security footage, while partially corrupted, was preserved in digital archives alongside technical test results, blueprints, and expert statements. Every dead end was meticulously recorded, not as a failure, but as evidence of the anomaly's persistence. Yet even with this documentation, the central question remained unanswered. How could a child vanish inside a perfectly functioning elevator, under the gaze of multiple witnesses, leaving no physical trace? The lack of resolution began to affect professional relationships. Engineers and forensic specialists reported frustration at being unable to provide definitive conclusions. Detectives admitted that conventional procedures offered no guidance for phenomena that appeared even remotely beyond explanation. The private investigator, though empathetic, confessed the difficulty of reconciling witness accounts with scientific analysis. For Sarah Benton, these admissions were both terrifying and galvanizing, affirming her belief that standard logic could not capture the reality of what had occurred. Her focus sharpened, not toward conventional closure, but toward discovering overlooked connections, hidden clues, and patterns that might reveal the mechanism behind Lucas's disappearance. Despite the stagnation, the investigative teams remained methodical. Each gap in schematics was documented, each corrupted CCTV feed logged, and every irregularity subjected to multiple rounds of analysis. No detail was dismissed, even when it offered no immediate answers. The persistence of anomalies, elevators functioning normally yet exhibiting impossible behavior, missing blueprints, unexplained security gaps, ensured that the case retained its central tension: a child lost within a system designed to protect him, leaving only questions that demanded answers beyond the ordinary. In this environment of meticulous investigation and unyielding dead ends, the Benton family's struggle became emblematic of the broader human tension between knowledge and mystery. The evidence was precise, measured, and analytical, yet it consistently failed to account for the disappearance. Each report, each analysis reinforced the same conclusion: nothing in the mechanics of the building or the procedures of its security team could explain what had happened to Lucas Benton. The family, detectives, and specialists were left in a shared limbo, forced to confront the possibility that the answers might lie somewhere the data could not reach, hidden in the intersections between human observation, mechanical function, and something unknown waiting to be discovered. 3 years had passed since Lucas Benton vanished from the Riverdale Mall, and the case had settled into a cold limbo. Investigators had long exhausted leads, engineers had cleared mechanical explanations, and the Benton family had oscillated between hope and despair, carrying a grief that never fully faded. Life moved forward, or at least attempted to, but for Sarah Benton, the absence of her son remained a daily reality, each day a quiet testament to loss. Then, an incident occurred that would reignite the case and challenge everything investigators had believed. It began with routine maintenance. A crew was inspecting the main elevator bank for a minor software update, documenting operational checks as per the mall's protocol. One technician, Michael Herrera, noticed the elevator had stopped on an unlisted floor, a space not documented in any blueprints or security schematics. It was a blank landing, a floor that should not exist. When the doors opened, the crew hesitated, unsure whether to step in. Inside was a scene that seemed torn from the unresolved nightmares of the past: a dusty pair of children's shoes, a small backpack, and a faint set of handprints smeared on the metal walls. Every element bore the imprint of abandonment, the residue of a presence long thought vanished. The report triggered immediate action. Detectives, forensic analysts, and the private investigator who had remained involved with the Benton case converged on the site. Crime scene tape cordoned off the floor, and every item was meticulously catalogued, photographed, and bagged for analysis. Dust samples, fibers, and fingerprints were collected with painstaking care, each detail potentially capable of unlocking answers. The elevators, despite operating normally on other floors, were treated as active crime scenes, with engineers monitoring every movement and documenting anomalies. This floor, like a ghost within the mall, had remained hidden for years, inaccessible to the public, invisible to previous inspections. For Sarah Benton, the discovery was surreal. She arrived at the scene in the early morning, drawn by a summons she barely comprehended. Her hands trembled as she saw the shoes and backpack, items that seemed frozen in time, the faint handprints evoking memories of a child who had been there, yet was not. Investigators allowed her only brief contact, ensuring the evidence remained uncontaminated. Yet, in that fleeting moment, she traced her fingers over the backpack, recognizing stains and marks that only her son's belongings would bear. It was an unmistakable connection, and yet the absence of Lucas himself created a cruel juxtaposition, blending the comfort of recognition with the despair of continued loss. Forensic teams worked swiftly, running DNA analyses on the dust, fibers, and backpack. Fingerprints were cross-referenced against law enforcement databases, and the shoes were examined for wear patterns consistent with a child of Lucas's age. Within days, confirmation arrived. The items belonged to Lucas Benton. DNA testing verified that fibers and skin traces on the backpack matched his genetic profile, eliminating doubt. The revelation sent shockwaves through the Benton family and investigative teams alike. 3 years after the disappearance, the boy's presence was confirmed, but the boy himself remained absent, a paradox that confounded even the most seasoned detectives. Authorities organized follow-up investigations. Technicians combed the building for additional hidden floors or anomalies, reviewing archived maintenance logs, elevator control histories, and security footage spanning years. None revealed prior access, entry, or incidents that could explain how the items arrived on the hidden floor. Surveillance gaps persisted, corrupted files, and missing schematics leaving spaces where history had seemingly been erased. Every lead offered only fragments, reinforcing the same pattern. Items connected to Lucas appeared, yet Lucas remained undetectable. Engineers verified that elevator systems were intact, without unexplained manipulations or malfunctions, leaving investigators questioning whether they were encountering an extraordinary technical anomaly, a deliberate concealment, or something inexplicable. The discovery captured public attention immediately. Local news outlets reported on the hidden floor, the dust-covered items, and the reappearance of Lucas's belongings. Social media forums exploded with speculation. Some hailed it as a breakthrough, a sign that Lucas might still be alive, while others suggested deception or hoax, questioning the credibility of the discovery. Conspiracy theories flourished, pointing to hidden dimensions, secret experiments, or otherworldly intervention, echoing debates that had simmered since the original disappearance. Meanwhile, the Benton family found themselves thrust back into the spotlight, facing both public support and skepticism, their private grief laid bare for national consumption. Psychologists and law enforcement offered tempered guidance. Experts emphasized caution against assuming Lucas's survival solely from the discovery of personal items, noting that evidence confirmed presence but not life. Detectives maintained a professional posture, documenting every detail while attempting to separate hope from assumptions. Yet even the most measured analysis struggled to account for the human dimension, the family's renewed pain, the emotional complexity of holding physical proof of a child's presence while remaining without the child himself. Sarah Benton oscillated between optimism and anguish. She spent hours examining the backpack, feeling the fabric, noticing small stains she remembered from her son's routines. She held the shoes, recalling their first steps, the tiny scuffs that had marked playground games. Each item served as a tangible bridge to a reality that had been lost, yet the absence of Lucas magnified the void. Max, Lucas's younger brother, became quiet and withdrawn, struggling to reconcile the concrete evidence with the ongoing disappearance. The household, long accustomed to careful routines and cautious hope, now brimmed with tension, anticipation, and lingering despair. Investigators concluded that the hidden floor was an anomaly beyond current understanding, a space that had remained inaccessible and undocumented, yet capable of containing items with undeniable connections to Lucas. Engineers confirmed that the elevator systems functioned normally, that there was no technical manipulation, and that the floor had evaded discovery for years. Forensic analysis reinforced the link to Lucas while leaving the central mystery intact. The boy himself was not present. In this resurgence of evidence, the line between breakthrough and illusion blurred. The discovery reignited the case, forcing authorities, experts, and the Benton family to confront a reality that combined tangible proof with enduring uncertainty. Items, DNA, and dust confirmed presence. Absence, fear, and unanswered questions confirmed loss. Hope and despair intertwined, leaving a single unresolved truth. Lucas Benton's disappearance remained as enigmatic as the day it occurred, now deepened by a revelation that promised answers, but delivered none. Following the discovery of Lucas Benton's belongings on the unlisted elevator floor, investigators faced a dilemma that defied conventional explanation. The evidence was undeniable. DNA confirmed the items belonged to Lucas, yet no trace of him remained. Experts from multiple disciplines were consulted, each offering theories that ranged from plausible engineering anomalies to scenarios that tested the limits of reason. Government engineers and architects examined the mall's blueprints, searching for hidden passages, service floors, or maintenance corridors that might have allowed access. Every drawing and schematic, including older archived plans, was scrutinized. In theory, there were spaces that could serve as unrecorded floors, yet in practice, they were physically unreachable, sealed off, or non-existent in all operational layouts. The building itself became a puzzle, a structure with secrets that refused to reveal themselves to those trained to read its plans. Elevator specialists were brought in to conduct exhaustive tests. They measured shaft dimensions, inspected cable systems, and ran simulations of all possible stops and side corridors. None could explain the existence of a floor invisible to the system for years. The elevator could not, by any known principle of engineering, reach a level undetected. Some theorists proposed anomalies in construction, a service floor forgotten in records or an expansion added during early renovations and subsequently erased. Others suggested mechanical failure had temporarily created a phantom stop, though repeated testing disproved this. Engineers acknowledged the limits of their knowledge, leaving an uncomfortable space where technical certainty ended and speculation began. Detectives and private investigators approached the case from a different angle. The idea of abduction became a central consideration, grounded in patterns of missing children across the city. Files were reviewed for unsolved cases of disappearances involving malls, stairwells, or elevators, seeking correlations with Lucas's timeline. Social workers and child protection agencies contributed data, and the pattern seemed to confirm that children could be targeted in brief, deliberate windows of opportunity. Yet no suspect, no witness, and no surveillance evidence emerged. Each search returned empty-handed, each potential lead dissolving under scrutiny. The hidden floor itself remained unreachable by conventional means, a locked enigma resisting all attempts at physical exploration. Meanwhile, psychologists and trauma experts offered perspective on human perception and memory. They cautioned that witness accounts, whether from family, mall staff, or casual observers, were susceptible to suggestion, memory distortion, and influence from urban legends. Stories of hidden floors and interdimensional elevators circulating online could reshape recollections, turning uncertainty into perceived facts. Memory, they noted, was fallible, especially when colored by grief or fear. The Benton family's own memories were scrutinized in interviews, not as doubts of authenticity, but as attempts to reconcile trauma, hope, and disbelief. Sarah Benton, in particular, wrestled with the duality of relief and terror. She wanted to believe her son had been somewhere safe, hidden but unharmed, yet each new theory carried the shadow of possibilities far darker than she could tolerate. Max, her younger son, responded differently, retreating into silence, fixating on small details in the elevator lobby, showing signs of anxiety that mirrored his mother's internal conflict. As public attention swelled, the investigative teams faced external pressure. News outlets had amplified the discovery. Social media forums were populated with speculation ranging from architectural oddities to supernatural phenomena, and amateur detectives flooded the conversation with theories that often contradicted one another. While authorities emphasized evidence-based searches and technical limitations, the cacophony of opinion added to the family's emotional burden. The Benton household became a microcosm of competing narratives, rational analysis versus instinctive hope, empirical observation versus folklore, the known versus the unknowable. Every expert opinion, every article, every online post added weight to the case, complicating the family's ability to process their grief or even to set expectations realistically. Investigators redoubled their efforts in the mall itself. Maintenance records were reviewed line by line, security systems examined frame by frame, and every archived blueprint cross-referenced with elevator schematics. Attempts to access the floor physically were thwarted at every turn. Structural assessments confirmed there was no conventional access point. Even advanced tools such as remote sensing, thermal scanning, and laser mapping yielded no openings. The floor existed only in fragments. The elevator would occasionally halt there under controlled tests. Yet no person could safely reach it without the elevator itself, leaving it an isolated anomaly, neither fully accessible nor entirely theoretical. The interplay of hope and fear intensified. The Benton family struggled to reconcile the tangible evidence with the enduring absence of Lucas himself. Each new theory presented an emotional paradox. If Lucas had been hidden safely, where and by whom? If he had been abducted, was he still alive? Or had the floor merely concealed evidence of an unresolved crime? Relief at the confirmation that the belongings were genuine was constantly undermined by terror at the potential realities those items represented. Sarah and Max alternated between clinging to the possibility of rescue and sinking into the dread of permanent loss, their emotional landscape dictated by what could be proven and what could only be imagined. Experts acknowledged the limits of human understanding. Architects, engineers, and forensic specialists admitted that while the physical evidence was clear, the mechanisms behind the floor's existence remained elusive. Detectives continued methodical searches while grappling with the reality that the solution might never conform to conventional reasoning. Each lead, each analysis, each consultation reinforced the sense that Lucas's case occupied a space between known and unknown, between science and speculation, leaving even professionals unsettled by the enduring mystery. By the conclusion of the intensified investigations, the case had evolved into something larger than a single disappearance. It was a nexus of engineering anomalies, potential abductions, urban legend influence, and human emotion, each element interweaving to create a mystery that refused closure. The Benton family lived suspended between hope and despair, clinging to the knowledge that Lucas's belongings were real, yet grappling with the terrifying possibilities of what had truly occurred. The floor itself remained inaccessible, a silent witness to events no one could fully explain, and a symbol of the unresolved truth at the heart of a story that would haunt the family, the city, and the investigators for years to come. After the discovery of Lucas Benton's belongings on the unlisted floor, the Benton family's lives became consumed by the elevator. Sarah Benton, once cautious and measured, began to monitor every movement within the mall's vertical shafts. She documented every elevator stop, noting times, irregular sounds, and minute delays. Even the faintest anomaly, a hesitation between floors, an unusual vibration, a subtle ding out of sequence, was recorded meticulously. She charted patterns across days and weeks, cross-referencing them with security logs and maintenance records she had painstakingly obtained. Her bedroom walls were covered in graphs, timelines, and photographs. Each new note, each scribbled observation, represented both hope and desperation. Sarah's nights were restless, sleep became fragmented as her mind replayed possibilities, scenarios, and untested theories about Lucas's disappearance. Investigators attempted to replicate the elevator anomaly themselves. Government engineers, forensic specialists, and private surveillance teams spent hours riding the shafts, programming sequences, and attempting to induce the floor to appear. Cameras were installed at every angle, sensors lined the doors, and technicians ran diagnostic software continuously. Yet, despite repeated trials, the elevator behaved as though the unlisted floor had never existed. Each failure added to the tension. Professionals familiar with anomalies in building systems grew frustrated, while Sarah's documentation grew more obsessive. She began comparing the elevator's behavior to past incidents across the city. Noticing subtle coincidences, children reported missing in other malls or apartment complexes, stairwell disappearances, brief elevator halts between floors that had never been explained. The private investigator on the case, a veteran of missing persons investigations, noted these patterns with a mixture of intrigue and unease. In his 30 years of work, he had encountered disappearances that defied logic, but the Benton case felt different, systematic, yet hidden behind the ordinary, as if someone or something was manipulating events beyond human perception. Lucas's father, once the pragmatic anchor of the family, began to fracture under the strain. His job suffered, meetings were missed, and conversations with friends and colleagues became terse and distracted. He withdrew from social support, unable to face the growing public scrutiny or the private terror of not knowing his son's fate. Arguments with Sarah became more frequent. She accused him of distancing himself emotionally. He accused her of losing perspective, chasing fantasies in the elevator shafts. The tension within the home mirrored the chaos outside, where social media amplified the story with theories of hidden floors, unexplained phenomena, and interdimensional abductions. Every post, every shared rumor further complicated the family's fragile state. Sarah, however, remained unwavering in her pursuit. She began to venture into the mall during off hours. timing her observations with cleaning schedules and maintenance windows. Security staff, sympathetic but constrained by rules, allowed her limited access, and she meticulously tracked the elevator's behavior under conditions she believed might reveal the hidden floor. Her notes grew increasingly detailed, including temperature fluctuations, electrical hums, and subtle changes in air pressure. In her mind, every factor was a potential clue. Friends and relatives expressed concern, warning her that her obsession was consuming her life, yet she could not relinquish the search. Hope, after all, was tethered to these anomalies, and letting go felt like abandoning Lucas. The private investigator continued to analyze other cases with similar characteristics, children disappearing from elevators, stairwells, or in brief, unsupervised moments within buildings. Though each case was officially unconnected, subtle consistencies emerged: timing, location, environmental factors. Some seemed to point toward deliberate abduction, others toward structural anomalies or lapses in oversight, yet none fully explained the events. The investigator noted that the Benton case intersected with these patterns in a way that suggested a more complex reality. He began keeping a separate log, cross-referencing dates, witness reports, and minor discrepancies in official records, convinced that a broader phenomenon, not yet fully understood, was at work. The emotional toll on the family was relentless. Days were consumed by speculation, nights by anxiety and restless observation. Sarah's obsessive tracking left little room for normal life. Meals were skipped, phone calls unanswered, personal hygiene delayed. Lucas's father retreated further, sleeping on the couch to avoid the intensity of Sarah's constant vigilance. Max, the younger son, oscillated between clinging to his mother and retreating into silence. The family home, once a place of stability, became a space where fear, hope, and disbelief collided with every tick of the clock, every door chime, every elevator bell. As months turned into years, the pattern of obsession deepened. Sarah began integrating forensic data with her observations: floor schematics, maintenance records, security footage. Even minor inconsistencies, missing maintenance logs, mislabeled schematics, gaps in surveillance records, were cataloged with precision. Each anomaly fed the notion that the elevator itself might be a doorway, a locus of events beyond normal comprehension. Investigators remained skeptical but could not fully discount the data she presented. The evidence, while incomplete, suggested a phenomenon that could not be dismissed as simple mechanical failure or human error. By the third year following Lucas's disappearance, the Benton family's existence revolved entirely around the elevator. Their lives were a constant balance between hope and terror. Sarah's obsession provided purpose, while the father's withdrawal reflected despair. The private investigator continued documenting patterns, haunted by the possibility that the unlisted floor and Lucas's belongings were only a fragment of a larger mystery. Every day, the family navigated a tense landscape where reality and speculation intertwined, leaving them suspended in a state of relentless uncertainty. In the end, the elevator's unlisted floor remained elusive. Lucas's presence was confirmed only through the belongings he had left behind. For the Benton family, the obsession, the analysis, and the ceaseless monitoring became both a lifeline and a prison, a testament to the devastating emotional toll of unresolved disappearance and the impossibility of finding closure when the truth lies just beyond reach. 3 years after Lucas Benton vanished, the child remains missing. The elevator, now infamous, continues to behave unpredictably. The phantom floor manifests only sporadically, emerging without warning, as if defying the laws of architecture and engineering. Attempts to access it on command consistently fail. Security teams, technicians, and private investigators have all tried, but each effort meets the same frustrating result. The floor cannot be summoned at will. It exists, yet it does not, a reality visible only in brief, fleeting moments. Experts, structural engineers, forensic analysts, and even psychologists admit they cannot provide a satisfactory explanation. Some suggest unrecorded service floors, hidden maintenance passages, or errors in historical blueprints. Others, less restrained, propose theories that challenge conventional understanding: anomalous spaces, unobserved architectural quirks, or phenomena that border on the unexplained. Despite these conjectures, no concrete evidence has emerged. Police have classified the case as unresolved, though they continue to log incidents meticulously, noting patterns, times, and irregularities for reference should new developments arise. Each logged anomaly reinforces the strangeness of the situation, yet yields no answers. For the Benton family, life has become a precarious balance between hope and despair. Sarah Benton continues her obsessive monitoring in private, while Lucas's father has retreated further into quiet resignation. Each new sighting, each minor anomaly, reignites the family's longing, yet the fleeting nature of these events prevents any sense of closure. They live in perpetual uncertainty, clinging to evidence that promises understanding but offers none. The elevator stands as a silent monument to the unknown. Its polished doors conceal a mystery that has refused explanation for years. The phantom floor remains an unresolved enigma, a haunting presence in the mall's routine, and a reminder that some disappearances leave questions far louder than the answers they may one day reveal.